Bret Baier. And now, finally, Bret, I get to ask you the questions. The tables have turned.
How are you, Morgan?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you, sir. There's so much to talk about. Obviously, the debate. We have some really interesting comments by David Axelrod yesterday on CNN about President Biden and how he feels like basically that it's time for him to go. But let's first start with the debate, because you anchored the very first debate in this Republican presidential primary. You have been doing this for years. Our own Hugh Hewitt will be doing it tomorrow night. Give our listeners and our viewers a glimpse, Bret, into what it's like to prepare for the debate and what it's like to try and corral all these candidates on the stage. What's that like for you?
It's not easy. I tell you that. It is like herding cats. It is a little tough in that, once one problem child starts, then the others feel like they have to jump in. In my case, I didn't have on my bingo card that Vice President Pence was going to be the problem child, but he was, and did not follow the rules, and when the bell went off, he kept talking, and so others then felt like they should do that. I think over time, maybe with fewer candidates on the stage, which there will be this time, that it'll be a little bit better to try to corral. That is the biggest thing: is equity on time, and making sure that you're getting a fair shake to everybody, but also creating those moments where they're interacting with each other, which is, I think, what voters want to see.
And so you just said that there'll be fewer people on stage this time. Who didn't make the cut? Who do we see tomorrow night?
Well, obviously Pence is out.
Yep.
Burgum did not make it. And they're going to make a final call, I think, about whether Tim Scott makes it or not, right?
That's interesting. I don't know yet. I think we'll find out tomorrow. It's interesting. So in your debate, you were saying that Vice President Pence was sort of the problem child. And then when our friend Dana Perino was moderating the debate, everybody became a problem child for Dana.
Yeah.
How do you get the voters, the candidates, to focus on a particular policy and problem set without getting them to drift off in other lanes? How do you corral them all?
It's their time, right? So they own the time. They could take the question and just turn it around and do something completely different. And obviously the people watching would see that and say he didn't answer the question at all. And then you could go back at that person and say, back to my original question. I think Dana tried to do that a couple of times. I think, this format, Hugh and I have talked about this a lot. I mean, ideally, you want to have more of a conversation about big issues, right? You want to see how this person is going to be a leader, ideally. And, I'm not sure that this format in the early stages is the best. I think when you get down to 3 or 4 candidates, that becomes a much different deal. I tried to have 2 candidates on together on my show, and the RNC said that was an unsanctioned debate. I was trying to have Chris Christie and Vivek Ramaswamy. I was going to have each kind of pair of candidates talk about issues in depth for like 45 minutes, and the RNC didn't like that. So they
That's
said
too bad. I mean, special report is always special report is always must-see TV, but that would have been must-see TV. Final thing on the debate, do you have any predictions for what will happen tomorrow night? Who's going to try to have sharp elbows? Who's going to try to have a breakout moment? Who's going to try to just coast under the radar? Any predictions?
I think Ron DeSantis really has to have a good night. He's going to try to ride the wave of his endorsement of Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, which is significant, and she's got a political machine. He's essentially parked in Iowa, and I think he needs a good night. I think Nikki Haley has seen some benefit from these debates, and in this current foreign policy environment, I think she feels comfortable. So I wouldn't be surprised if she has a good night as well.
Quickly, we're switching over to President Biden and the Democrats. You're having a robust, healthy debate on the Republican side. But on the Democrats, you have, former President Obama's political guru, the man behind the scenes for many years, David Axelrod, saying both publicly on CNN, but also writing in his columns, basically that it's time for Biden to set aside. How long can the Biden team kind of pretend that the emperor has clothes on when he doesn't?
I think it's becoming really, really difficult. And I've talked to a lot of Democrats in circles up here in D.C., and it's almost five-alarm fire stage. And they are trying to figure out the path of how to deal with this. And I think that they feel like by the time you get to the election, that President Biden is going to be pretty vulnerable, not only on policy and in the polls, but how he can handle the job and the campaign. So I think there is a real concern here, and you're just starting to see it bubble up this weekend. I mean, look at all the Sunday shows that focused on that New York Times CNN poll. It's one poll, but it does give you a snapshot of how weak he is in different areas.
But how does this, if the Democrats are so concerned about this, Bret, it's basically too late for many of the early states for anyone else to get on the ballot. So is this, if they're so concerned about this, does this mean that we're looking at some sort of brokered convention in the Democratic primary in August?
I think it's very, very possible. I think it went above 50% that is going to happen.
Wow.
Democrats, they operate differently than the Republicans. They have many more mechanisms that they can use, and super delegates, and you could see something where, it's hard to imagine, but I think you could see something where President Biden says, "I'm not going to go on," and some other candidate comes up and is essentially lifted up in a convention situation.
Bret, how much is what's going on in Israel and President Biden's actually strong support for Israel? Hasn't done everything from a policy perspective that I would want, but he's probably been better than most Democrats would be on Israel during this time. And you're seeing his base revolt. You're seeing his poll numbers start to be affected within his own party because of it. How much of this, maybe we need to move Biden out of it, is because of his support for Israel? Is that just an untenable position within the Democratic Party right now?
It's interesting, Morgan. I think that's a good point. There's definitely a split, a rift inside the Democratic Party when it comes to Israel, and you're seeing that very publicly. I don't think people realize the extent of it, and I think that is a big split. And you start talking about certain states and Muslim American voters, and they're not monolithic, but clearly it affects places that are swing states. Michigan, there's a population in Arizona. There's like all these places, and I don't know. It doesn't seem like the politics is factoring in, but definitely the talking about Israel and the war is evolving, heading more towards humanitarian pauses.
Well, just to go back to the debate, we have some breaking news, Bret, actually. The RNC has just announced their participants for the third debate tomorrow night. It is Chris Christie, Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Senator Tim Scott did make that list.
There you go. He made the cut. So it's still fewer. You don't have Pence, you don't have Burgum. And I hope for Hugh's sake that they all color within the lines.
I highly doubt that in today's Republican politics that they're going to. They're all going to need that breakout moment, but that'll make it really very interesting for us. Final thing, just to return to Israel very quickly. We just got about 30 seconds left, Bret. But the efforts to sort of censor Rashida Tlaib have gone nowhere. How much longer can she continue to make these statements and the Democratic Party just sort of like not do anything about it?
I think eventually there's going to be, two trains on the track, and they're going to hit each other. It doesn't work, and some of the Jewish supporting Democratic congressmen and women are going to step up and do something.
I agree. Well, I was very excited to turn the tables on Bret Baier this morning. He's been asking me questions for years. I got to question him today.